So in today's video, I'm going to be presenting to you guys three particular artifacts that you can find at the McCord Museum in their latest exhibit that started a couple weeks ago called Becoming Montreal, the 1800s painted by Duncan. It's a very good exhibit. I really appreciate it. And even though the McCord Museum isn't a very big museum, I always like it because it is, quaint little museum, really great staff, and they always have really good exhibits there. So this first painting is, as you can see, called Sisters of Providence from Montreal. It's one of the two that I'm going to be presenting today that's really talking about the religious community in Montreal. For those of you who don't know, Montreal, like many places in Canada, for a long time, religious communities were extremely important and really helped to make Canada, make Montreal, make Quebec what it is. And just in case you guys don't know, but even if you do, um, Quebec, especially, is a very Catholic part of Quebec. Even to this day, you'll find more Catholic churches than you'll find Protestant or Orthodox churches. But there are, of course, other churches and there are other religions that can be found, obviously, in modern day Quebec and in Montreal. And of course, Catholics nowadays aren't necessarily as practicing as they used to be, especially since the 1940s and 50s, where we had what's called the Révolution Tranquille, the Quiet Revolution. That's a time period when a lot of people in Quebec were really standing up against the religious control that the Catholic Church had. Many felt that the church had too much power, had too much say in what people were doing in their everyday life. But this is still a nice little representation of how the female religious communities would dress, and of course, in accordance to the particular community. Because for those of you who don't know, we often say the Catholic Church, but there are, subdivisions in the Catholic Church. So even though the Catholic Church tends to be fairly, the same and fairly, mostly similar. There are still a certain amount of differences. And so here, the painting really tried to show how each religious community would dress and, of course, represent each sister, each woman that was part of this community might have had a different role. So to sort of differentiate themselves, you might have one sister that might have a different color code or something that would distinguish themselves from the other sisters so that everybody knew this particular woman would have a different role in the church than some of the other women, etc. So as you can see, this piece is also part of technically the archives of the city of Montreal. So when you see Archives de la Ville de Montréal at the bottom here, just above the number, that's the city's archive. And yes, the city's archive is publicly accessible. You can go to the archive and check out some of their items. They don't have exhibits per se, but it is something that you can go ahead and ask. I want to see documents from this particular archive. So what I like about this particular drawing is that it's relatively simple, a little bit of color, but it's not overly complex because again, this is supposed to be, an actual representation of, actual, quote unquote working women, women who are practicing their faith, serving the community, etc. So obviously this isn't meant to be, overly gorgeous and oh my God. And it's really meant to show that these women were simply living their lives, simply living their faith, and really just trying to build the community, both the religious community, but just the Montreal community. We tend to forget that for a long time, religion, faith, life, everyday life were not two separate things. You lived your faith every day in how you spoke to other people, how you ate, what you ate, right? So it wasn't, religion wasn't something that was just celebrated on Easter and Christmas. Faith was something that you celebrated, that you practiced every day in every way possible, right? From, like I said, from what you ate to what you wore, how you spoke to other people. So they really wanted in this painting to really just show homage to that, and really just people were just living a simple life and just trying to be the best versions of themselves and really put the best foot forward and really just be part of the community. Let's not do harm to each other. Let's try to build up ourselves and each other at the same time. So it's really trying to represent that in as simple of a way as possible. People weren't, part of that, hustle culture and let's, we have to get our own bag and think, each for ourselves. It's like, no, let's help each other out through our faith, through our religious beliefs, etc. So of course nowadays a lot of people look at this life and like, oh, it's not for me, and I couldn't do that. But there's certain nice and good aspects to it. I do like and respect the fact that people were very much community minded, very much let's build together. And even if I can't succeed, I want you to succeed. I want to make sure that at least you have a better life than I had, right? So it's really that sense of togetherness that sometimes I feel like, we're lacking a little bit here. Even as Canadians, sometimes you have to be reminded that it's not just about you. It's not just about, the little corner of the world that you're a part of. That there's, sometimes things that are bigger than you that you have to fight for or talk about or whatever the case might be. So this is the second painting that we're seeing called Hôtel Dieu, which is still a building that exists. And this one gives a little bit more of an explanation as to what I was saying before about these paintings being commissioned. It was commissioned by Jacques Viger. That Duncan, who's the painter, do these works to commemorate the religious communities that were so vital in building Montreal and building Quebec and many other parts of Canada as well. Obviously, the religious communities had a big impact as well in the US and many other countries as well. So as you can see, it's still showing, a little bit of color, not too much, very simple, very to the point, really to, pay respect and homage to these quote unquote working women. They might not be working women in the traditional sense, but they're still out there doing their part to help build the religious community and the community in general. So obviously, women were for a very long time limited to what they could do to participate in society. Of course, becoming a sister, becoming a nun was one of the few things that they were allowed to do. And as a nun or a member of the religious community, they could do minimum medical care to the community. So if you fell ill, if you were dying, etc., you most likely were being helped by a nun or a sister or somebody that was part of the religious community that you were part, or that was happened to be in the area that you fell ill. So even though women weren't, engineers and doctors and miners and all of that, they still participated in their way in the community. They still were they still were nurses, maybe, but they were teachers and they were obviously religious women. So obviously nowadays we can do a lot of things, still not everything, but we still can do a lot. So this is the final painting that will be seen in today's video. It's called Montreal Ice Bridge. It's technically part of the National Gallery of Canada, item number 9930. So as you can see, sometimes in order to build an exhibit, a museum might have to get several items from other museums in order to present a particular exhibit. So even though a lot of this you'll find from one particular museum, you'll still might find a few items from other museums that might be pertinent. So that's normal. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Montreal for a very long time, in order to conserve food, would use ice blocks. All right, so part of that is, of course, well, we have these quote unquote ice bridges, because for those of you who don't know, the island Montreal is, well, an island. So, of course, you might have to use these ice, quote unquote, ice bridges to get across the St. Lawrence River that surrounds the island of Montreal, or Rivière des Prairies, I believe that's called on the southern part. But at the same time, you could use the ice that was being cleared to refrigerate food, particularly in the winter or spring or fall, where it was getting cool but not quite cool enough. So obviously during winter times, these quote unquote ice bridges were being served, for two things at the same time, quite often. Not always, but often enough. So it's really just interesting to see a glimpse in the past and see how things were done back in the day, quote unquote, right? And how you often had to take one thing and make it last as long as possible. So that might mean doing 10 things with the one, right? So instead of just throwing the ice away, you'll use the ice to cool down something, or maybe put out fire, or maybe you would melt it for water, etc., right? So one thing was never just one thing. One thing is several things at the same time. You really had to be sure that you got as many uses as you could from as many things as you could, because you could not guarantee that tomorrow you would get more of whatever it was, right? So you really want to make sure that everything you had went as far as possible. So this is just a little message. I know that I haven't been posting as many videos as I normally would. Like I said, in a couple of videos and a couple of times, I recently had to move. As much as I would have loved to have lived where I was forever and ever, unfortunately, I knew the time was going to come for me to move, so that's what I did. So starting August 1st, I'm in a new place. So that's why I'm still, even 2, 3 weeks later, I'm still not quite back into my normal sense of things. I don't even have my computer in my new place. So I'm still, trying to get back into the rhythm, but I am taking the time to, create a couple videos here, create a couple videos there. So whenever I can, I'll try to get back into the rhythm, try to get back into giving you guys content every week. I might have to move the lives that I have. I know I have 2 or 3 scheduled for in the month, but I might have to move them to other days. But hopefully I'll be able to do them, but we'll see. So keep your eye out. I might have to cancel them, but hopefully not. So I hope to see you guys soon enough and talk to you guys soon enough in the lives. Have a great one, guys.